Hey there guys, and welcome to my first ever video! I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing, so please bear with me while I figure this stuff out. For the first project, we are going to be using this clawed wolf to make a very snazzy object-headed doll. Fall is my favorite season, so I really wanted to do something that really encompassed the spirit of the season. I had drawn this pumpkin-headed dude a few years ago for an Inktober prompt, and I've always loved the idea of a pumpkin head drinking a human spice latte. So I redesigned him a little bit for this project. Strangely enough, we're starting all this off with some pumpkin juice. More specifically, the bottle's top. It's the perfect guideline and will help reduce the weight of the head so it's not pure epoxy sculpt. So without further ado, it's time to get this party started! Now, as much as I like Claude's face sculpt, we won't be needing it for this project. It would just be a waste to cover it up with clay, so it's time to take it off. Just place the doll's head into some very hot water for a few minutes to soften the vinyl enough so that it's easier to yank his head right off. Make sure to use a towel to shield from the heat and pull with all your might. Ah man, it's really stuck on there, isn't it? Oh! Well, this is something that's never happened to me before. I guess the boy dolls have more vinyl in their necks than the girls? Whew. After a minute, I finally managed to detangle the head from the neck peg, and we can finally move on to the next step. These Monster High neck pegs work really well because the vinyl is squishy enough to let the rigid pieces through, but the hooks keep it from falling it back out. Since I'm planning to sculpt the bottom of the pumpkin, this peg unfortunately won't work because there's no way to get it in without damaging either itself or the sculpt. So, we need to make our own peg. To do this, we are going to be using half of this little baby beauty blender I found, and replacing the original peg with it. Of course, to do that, we have to remove the original peg first. The Beauty Blender works because it will easily be able to squish inside the little opening that we're going to leave inside the bottom of the pumpkin. Before continuing with making the neck peg, I wanted to make sure that the hole I made for the neck was going to be large enough for the Beauty Blender to fit through, but small enough so that it wouldn't be able to slide right out. For this, I used my 2-part epoxy sculpt, which is honestly my best friend when it comes to making dolls because it's super sturdy and versatile, and you can use it on practically anything. I make a ring around the neck where I want the head to rest, and I leave it alone for a while to cure so that I'll be able to test it out once it's completely set. It's not easy to get through, which is exactly how I want it to be. I just need to clean it up a bit so it doesn't have any of the weird bumps that will impede the movement of the head. I jump over to working on the pumpkin now, filling it with the lightest air dry clay I could find. I wanted to bulk up the inside and give the epoxy something to grab onto, all while trying to keep it as lightweight as possible and checking that I was leaving enough room for the neck peg. While we leave that to dry, we can finally attach the Beauty Blender to the doll by wrapping a wire around the anchor in the neck and piercing the blender with it. I twist the ends of the wire into a flat disc on top of the blender and smush it down so it's firmly in there and the wire won't slip out during movement. Now that the air dry clay is finally hardened, we can add epoxy sculpt and start fleshing out the bottom of the pumpkin head. I take it pretty slow, adding up layers of epoxy until it's the right general shape and size, before going in and sculpting in the grooves and adding the details. Once I'm satisfied with the rough shape, I can finally add the neck ring to the sculpture and work on slowly blending it in. Now that the sculpture is all done, it's time for everyone's favorite part that isn't time-consuming at all. Sanding! That was a joke, I hope you know. We're going to be sanding for days here. Make sure to wear a mask. Don't want to be breathing in any of those nasty little particles. Start with a rougher grade first, getting progressively smoother to work out any flaws. I personally prefer nail files and buffers. I find them really easy to use and capable of getting in all the little nooks and crannies. A million years later, we're finally done. Look how smooth it is. If you thought we were done sculpting, well, think again. While this pumpkin does have a stem, it's not quite like the one I had in my concept art, so I would do what any sensible artist would do and hack off most of the stem so I can sculpt my own on top of it. I won't be sanding this part because I want it to stay kind of rough and bumpy like wood would be. The last step before we paint is to prepare the vine. I'll be using this garden wire because it's the perfect size and it's already green. Just mark the area on your pumpkin where you want the vine to insert and then drill away. I wasn't able to get footage of actually drilling the hole because the area where I have my drum mold has absolutely nowhere to put a camera and I needed two hands, so I'll figure that out for next time. Now it's time for the fun part, painting! I start by laying down my base color. I usually have to do about 3 coats before it's opaque enough, and then I seal it in using Mod Podge to make sure the paint stays put and doesn't scratch off while I continue to paint on it. From this point on, it's all about putting in highlights and adding shadows to give the structure a little bit more dimension. Oh, and also painting the stem, which I forgot to do in the base coat stage. Oops. I really try to push and pull the colors as far as they'll go, using Mod Podge every time I want to save my progress. Now that the head is all done, it's time to reacquaint him with his body. The next step is clothes. I will be using this pair of sneakers that the doll came with and painting them black and brown, following the same method I just used on his head. For his clothes, I'm using this pair of jeans that came in a doll lot I got off eBay. I'm not sure what doll they're from since they're a little bit big for Monster High, but that's an easy fix. I'm also using this adorable sweater and scarf that was custom made for me by Ordalia Handwork on Etsy. I highly recommend her shop. She is absolutely wonderful and her work is so high quality, and I'm sorry I probably butchered your name. It's time to dress him up now! Since the jeans are just a little bit big, I'm simply going to safety pin the extra fabric in the back, since it'll be covered up by his sweater and you won't be able to see it. I was looking at this doll, and I couldn't help but feel like I was forgetting something. I gave him a once over before realizing I completely forgot about the vine that's supposed to go in his head. I take a long piece of garden wire and twist it into shape around his head. I take a leaf off this bunch of fake ivy I have, and as soon as I hot glue these to the pumpkin, he'll finally be complete. I am really happy with how this guy turned out, but I am a little bit sad I didn't have time to include his frog friend. I'll probably figure out something for him on my own, and then post pictures of him to my Instagram when I do. I was having a lot of trouble coming up with a name for this fine fellow, until one of my friends on Instagram suggested the name Charlemagne, or Charlie for short, and I absolutely fell in love with it. I really hope you guys liked Charlie and enjoyed watching this video. I know I had a lot of fun making it. So, until next time.